Sorry for the off-brand thumbnail, I know it's not my usual style. Here, I'll make it up to you. I've never made a video like this, but since playing ABZU, all I've wanted to do is to give it an honest and in-depth review, as well as share my absolute love for this game. As some of you watching may already know, Steam has put a ton of their games on massive sale during this pandemic in hopes to get more people to spend money on their service. It worked. I've heard amazing things about this game since it launched, and I've been itching to try it myself. I've managed to hold off watching gameplay of it for like 3.5 years, and boy oh boy, I think it made the experience that much better. I'd recommend at least starting a playthrough of this game before watching this all the way through, but I'm not going to make you do anything. I'll stop beating around the bush now. ABZU is one of the greatest visual experiences I've ever had in a video game. It's made by the same studio responsible for Journey, and it takes a beautiful dive into one of the most terrifying places, the ocean. The graphics remind me a lot of Wind Waker, with a beautiful cel-shaded aesthetic, making the vibrantly colored environment all the more breathtaking. It's a little hard to believe that this game was released almost 4 years ago because the graphics hold up that well. Some of my favorite games of all time are cel-shaded, the aforementioned Wind Waker, whose graphics are similar to ABZU, as well as Breath of the Wild, and the visually different Borderlands series and Jet Set Radio. The latter two games/series taking a more hand-drawn aesthetic, using cel shading to improve that aesthetic. Looking at other people's Steam reviews of the game will give you a pretty good idea of what the game is like.
This game is like playing through a Fantasia movie. It was so much more than I ever expected it to be, and it is honestly the best game I have played in a long time.
I loved this game for its breathtaking beauty and being able to experience what it's like under the ocean. The music of the soundtrack describes perfectly the game's atmosphere.
Nothing short of an indisputable argument for the case that yes, video games can be art.
A nice-looking and relaxing game, once you figure out how the controls work.
You get the idea. People love this game, and with good reason. There's a lot that makes this game great. It tells a complex narrative without the use of a single word. It's linear and simple in a way that doesn't hold your hand. Every aspect of the design is unique yet familiar, and the music perfectly complements every moment of the game. The vast ocean environments you travel through are bright, colorful, inviting, and fill you with a sense of wonder. Its use of color, sound design, and style make this game truly incredible. I don't want to go too deep into explaining or analyzing the story, so I'm just going to talk about some of the narrative aspects that I liked. The robot friends you make throughout the game give you a feeling of trust. You trust the little light-up cylinders from the moment you tug the first one out of the sand. They have the same colors as you, so naturally you can assume that they're friendly. Since there are no words telling you anything, the only thing you can do is assume. So, when the great white shark gains one of the robots, you naturally assume that it's evil, and continue along your journey remaining wary of the shark. Through paintings on the walls of submerged ruins, you can then assume that your character has something to do with the energy of the ocean, and that the great white shark is some sort of protector of the ocean. It's then revealed through the same type of subtle visual storytelling that you learn the true purpose of both your character and the robot friends you've made along the way. The story is helped immensely by the visuals and the sound design. Like I mentioned earlier, the game is cel-shaded like Wind Waker, giving it a brighter, more cartoony look to it. Combined with the carefully crafted environments that you're surrounded by, and you have yourself what might be the most atmospheric game I've ever played. Every plant, stone, wall, and fish feels handcrafted and unique. The life you encounter when traversing the ocean flutters and glides around you so naturally, and the environments shift along with the current in such a perfect way. My entire playthrough was filled with joy and wonder, and even the darkest parts of the game, I stayed curious as to what new life I would discover. The game is not realistic. That's not a criticism at all. In fact, I'd say it's the opposite. Prioritizing style over realism is what allows games to age well, and it's hard to mess up a style. The fact that it doesn't try to look realistic allows the game to focus more on the environments and bringing life to the world that you explore. The life in the game is the most realistic part of it. It doesn't look real, but it acts real. Fish will get out of your way when you swim close to them. If you stay still, they'll swim closer to you and investigate. They swim in naturally unpredictable patterns. Fish will stay close to others like them, naturally forming schools, and yet you can easily break them apart by swimming by. What adds even more atmosphere is the soundtrack. I've been using the soundtrack as background music for this review, and I gotta say, it's one of my favorite video game soundtracks ever. It's clearly a soundtrack built for this game, and it's unlike Sunset Overdrive in that I wouldn't listen to the music outside of the game. More on that in another video. But in my time playing the game, I often found myself pausing and taking in the beautiful music. This game is truly amazing, and I would end my review here, but it can't be perfect. There are still some shortcomings with this game, and a few pretty glaring flaws. My biggest issue with this game is the controls. As you can probably see from the footage I'm about to show on screen, I had a lot of trouble with the controls throughout my playthrough of ABZU. I was constantly running into walls, not navigating something correctly, or trying to do something I had no idea was impossible. Sure, there are a lot of transitions that are completely seamless, and those sections were amazing. Going from moving to interacting with an object is the smoothest animation I've seen in a game, but that same seamlessness cannot be seen throughout the rest of the gameplay. If you don't already have one, I suggest buying a controller for the experience, as the mouse and keyboard controls aren't good. I played with the mouse and keyboard for all of about 2 minutes before switching to the controller. The camera is also frustrating to deal with. It was like an old N64 game with better graphics. For the most part though, it was easy to look around and be able to find my way places, but when it wasn't, it was incredibly frustrating. Now I'd like to take some time to talk about the gameplay, because this is something that ABZU does amazingly, but it's also something that hurts the game a lot. The game is not hard at all, which is good. It's a game about exploration, not combat or puzzles. However, there are large, open spaces that you have to navigate through when you're going at a very slow pace. The game forces you to take in all of your surroundings, even when there aren't many surroundings to take in. Don't get me wrong, I still loved this game, and there were very few places where this was the case, but I found myself losing my patience with the gameplay fairly easily, especially when an environment is repetitive or, dare I say, ugly. There is one section in this entire game that I have no fun playing or looking at, and that's inside the big machine thing that I'm showing on screen. There is nothing that's visually appealing about this part of the game, and this is the one part with difficult gameplay. You have to navigate around these weird electricity tetrahedron guys or else you get stunned. It leads to a cycle of getting stunned and drifting into another one and getting stunned and so on and so forth. It's the only part that really stands out as being unfun, so to speak, but there aren't really parts of this game that stand out as being actually fun either, since the gameplay is repetitive, consisting of holding the right trigger and mashing the A button until you find something to interact with. I'm gonna go off script a little bit and talk about the color palette, because that same machine section also has the worst color palette of the entire game. Even though the color palette mostly consists of browns, blues, and greens with the occasional gray or pink, that machine section really stands out with its oppressive amounts of red and orange. The devs really just didn't do the color orange well in this game. There's another section that's primarily orange that I also didn't find very visually appealing, and there were a lot of sections throughout the game where the color of the sand or the color of the rocks just looked off in a way that distracted me. Another note about the gameplay is, I think Dunkey made a video on this about how the old Doom games, you would go through an area, clear out all the enemies, and then struggle to find the exit. ABZU has that same problem, except it's just struggling to find where to go next. I said this game was very linear, and that is true. It's very hard to get lost, but at the same time, it can also be very hard to find where you are supposed to be going. There's this one section in particular where I actually, since I lost the footage of it, I had to go back and replay it, and I probably spent like 10 minutes swimming around the same very small portion of the game over and over again, trying to find one thing to interact with. I'm not really a fan of walking simulators or anything of that sort, as you can probably tell. I have no interest in ever playing a game like Death Stranding just because I think I'd lose my patience with it so quickly. And I think the only reason why I enjoyed ABZU in the first place was because of the visuals, and not because of the gameplay, but purely because of the visual experience and just how alive everything felt. Overall, ABZU is an incredible game, even when it doesn't feel like a game. I think it's more accurate to call this a visual experience, but that just sounds pretentious. The environments are perfectly crafted, the atmosphere is beautiful, and it blends style with realism in the best way imaginable. I would recommend this game to people who don't play video games and people who have an appreciation for graphics and not much else. The limited gameplay and simple controls make this game super inviting to beginners, although I think anybody with an appreciation for this level of style and theme would love this game in spite of its flaws. The only thing that's not super beginner friendly about this game is how little it tells you. I think there are a total of 3 directions that you're given, and that's how to dive, how to boost, and how to grab onto something, and that's it. So it doesn't try to hold your hand, and I think that's a thing that it does really well for people who are more experienced with video games, but for people who are less into video games, I think that's something that could be a severe roadblock for them in enjoying the game. I'd like this game a lot better if the flaws in it weren't that frustrating to deal with. Movement in an exploration game is, I think, the second most important part, and while ABZU nails the most important part, the visuals, the controls and gameplay prevent this game from being perfect. As I mentioned earlier, I did actually end up replaying a pretty large chunk of the game just because my recording got deleted, and I will say about the replay value, it's one of those games that I feel like I would probably only end up doing a full playthrough of once. I can't see myself having fun doing a second full playthrough of this game, and I feel like that also hurts it a lot. If maybe the story were a little bit longer, or the gameplay were a little bit more complex, or if it had some puzzles in it, I would enjoy replaying it a lot more. But just because that isn't the case, I don't think I'm ever going to touch this game again, which is a shame because of how pretty it is. While replay value isn't the most important part of any game, it still is important when you're considering the price. I bought this game when it was on sale. I only spent $5 on it, and had I spent the full $15 or $20 on it, I don't think I would have been as happy with my purchase. But since I bought it on sale, I'm a lot happier with it. Overall, I'd probably give this game an 8 out of 10. I know number ratings aren't necessarily the most helpful thing, but this is really meant to be an artsy game, and it truly is a testament to the fact that video games can be art, or maybe they just always are art. Either way, ABZU is definitely a very artistic game, and I think anybody with an appreciation for graphics and style would love it. Thank you for watching this. I hope that if you haven't already played ABZU, that you will. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have any feedback. I'd love to hear it. And I hope to be making more of these videos in the future. Peace.